Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So, in the last class, we were going ahead and we were talking about what is TRIPS. We looked into the various objectives of TRIPS. Today, we want to go ahead and we want to discuss further and we want to link TRIPS with India specifically. We want to go ahead and we want to understand whether India is following TRIPS or not. And if it is following, then what are the limitations it is facing? What are the issues it is facing, right? So to begin with, I want to talk a bit about the coverage of TRIPS. What all comes under TRIPS? We talked about this in the last class also. So when we talk about the coverage of TRIPS, right, we have number one, copyright and related rights. Number two, trademark. Number three, we talked about this a bit in the last class, geographical indications. Number four, industrial design. Number five, patents. Number six, layout design. Number seven, trade secrets. So all these are covered under TRIPS, right? TRIPS is giving you minimum standard of protection for all these seven categories. Okay. But now we want to go ahead and we want to understand how this is going and linking to India. But usko link karne ke liye, I want to teach another thing, which is the principles of TRIPS. So the first principle of TRIPS is national treatment, right? Is national treatment. Mane, I should not go ahead and I should not I should not discriminate, right? Any foreign IPR holder from domestic IPR holder. I should not be discriminating. What does it mean? What is the meaning of not discriminating? Not discriminating basically goes ahead and means that, so for example, if India gives a certain level copyright protection to Indian author, right, then it must also apply to US author. It must also apply to Japanese author, right? So national treatment goes ahead and says that a country must treat foreign IPR holder no less favorably than its own nationals, Second beta, तो ये इसका मतलब समझ में आ गया ना कि अगर सपोज लेट्स से समवन हैज रिटन अ बुक राइट इन इंडिया and they are getting certain amount of protection, right? Copyright protection. Then the same amount of protection should be given to any US author also or a Japanese author also. The second one is most favored nation treatment. Most favored nation treatment says that if you are going ahead and if you are giving any enhanced protection to a particular inventor, it must be extended to all WTO members, right? If you are giving any privilege, any immunity to one WTO member, then you have to extend that to all WTO members. So, for example, if India gives enhanced patent protection to European Union inventor, इंडिया ने यूरोपियन यूनियन के साथ कोई बायलैटरल डील किया है और वो उनको कुछ एक प्रोटेक्शन दे रहा है, पेटेंट प्रोटेक्शन दे रहा है, तो वो सिर्फ इसको नहीं दे सकता, उसको इस चीज को बाकी सारे WTO मेंबर्स को भी देना पड़ेगा, राइट? सो राइट डाउन एनी एडवांटेज, फेवर, privilege or immunity given to nationals of one WTO member must be extended to all WTO members. Must be extended to all WTO members. Okay. I've given you an example. If India is giving any enhanced protection to European Union inventor, maybe due to some bilateral deal, then it must extend that to all WTO members. The third one that we have, that is minimum standard, right? So this says that all WTO member have to comply with the baseline protection level set by TRIPS, irrespective of their domestic preference. जैसे अगर ट्रिप्स बोलता है कि पेटेंट जो भी पेटेंट फाइल करेगा उसको 20 साल का प्रोटेक्शन मिलेगा, तो आपको अपनी कंट्री में 20 साल का प्रोटेक्शन देना ही पड़ेगा। आप 30 दे सकते हो, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, पर आप 20 से कम नहीं दे सकते हो। 20 मिनिमम स्टैंडर्ड सेट हो गया ट्रिप्स के थ्रू कि अगर कोई भी पेटेंट फाइल करता है तो उसको ये 20 इयर्स का प्रोटेक्शन मिलेगा ही मिलेगा, राइट? सो प्लीज राइट डाउन ऑल WTO members must comply with baseline protection level set by TRIPS, regardless of their domestic preference. Regardless of their domestic preference, right? Is it clear? That's the next one. So as I said, I mean, you can give a higher preference, right? I mean, अगर ट्रिप says 20 तो आप 30 दे सकते हो. You can allow 30 years of protection, but you cannot allow 15 years of protection. आपको 20 तो देना ही पड़ेगा. That's the minimum standard you have to go ahead and follow. Okay. Fourth, balance between rights and public interest. Balance between right and public interest. So what this goes ahead and this says is that, you know, you have to, we have talked about this in objective also. You have to recognize that IPR protection should contribute to technological innovation, transfer of technology and public welfare. ठीक है? तो इस केस में हम ये बोल रहे हैं कि ये बैलेंस मेंटेन रहना चाहिए, है ना? अग्रीड कि कोई भी इनोवेशन सिर्फ तब करेगा जब आप उसको IPR दोगे, बट ऐसा भी ना हो कि उसका मोनोपोली क्रिएट हो जाए, पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट हट जाए, right? So that balance has to be maintained, and we have written that well under this, under the objectives. I've already written it, so I'm not going to rewrite it. balancing between the right and obligation. Okay. Okay, fifth one. Integration with pre-existing conventions. Integrating with pre-existing conventions. So, जो भी, so we know that, this TRIPS, it came in Uruguay round. We talked about this, है ना? But इससे पहले जो भी अलग अलग कन्वेंशन हुए हैं, हमें ट्रिप्स को उसके साथ इंटीग्रेट करना जरूरी है. So there has been Paris Convention, which talked about industrial property. There has been Berne Convention, which talked about copyright. There has been Rome Convention, which talked about performers, broadcasters. There has been IPIC Treaty, right? So we have to incorporate trips with these, and we have to build trips on these, right? So please write down. Trips incorporates and builds upon Paris Convention. This is for industrial property. Berne Convention. This is for copyright. Rome Convention. This is for performers, broadcasters, etc. And IPIC Treaty. This is for integrated circuit. Right. So how do you remember this from exam point of view? But the principles you can remember by the short form NMMBI. National treatment, MFN treatment, minimum standard, balance between right and public interest, and integration with earlier IPR treaties. Right. Now let us go ahead and let us take this in detail, and let us come back to the topic that I wanted to go ahead and I wanted to do, which is talking about what are the, how do you connect trips to India, right? And in order to do that, we want to also do something which is known as enforcement obligation. Enforcement obligation. So what are the enforcement obligations that we have under TRIP? Now, the first enforcement obligation is enforcement obligation का क्या मतलब है कि जब आप ट्रिप्स को इन्फोर्स करो तो आपको क्या क्या चीजें फॉलो करनी पड़ेंगी, है ना? पहला है कि आपको जो भी हमने ये जनरल प्रिंसिपल्स लिखे हैं उनको फॉलो करना पड़ेगा, ठीक है? दूसरा कि हम जो भी अपना प्रोसीजर फॉलो करें, इट हैज टू बी फेयर, इट हैज टू बी इक्विटेबल, right? It has to be not or non-complicated. It has to be less costly. It has to be free from unreasonable delays. So you remember in the last class, I told you कि transition period दिया गया था, which was different for different countries, right? So we said that there is a transition period which was for India, for developing countries, and there was a transition period which was for least developed countries. And we said कि ठीक है, we agree you may not be able to go ahead and bring this immediately, right? But we are giving you these many years, 5 years, 10 years, to ensure कि आप अपनी country में trips लेके आ पाओ. So it does not mean that if we are giving some period, if there is some transition period given, that it has unreasonable delays, right? And also it should not be very unnecessarily complicated or costly. आपको cost को control में रखते हुए trips को implement करना होगा, right? अच्छा, one more thing which is under the enforcement obligation, that is basically civil and administrative procedure. सिविल एंड एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव प्रोसीजर माने कि अगर कभी आपको लगता है कि मैंने एक पेटेंट फाइल किया था बट अब लोग इजीली उसको, देयर इज एन इन्फ्रिंजमेंट इशू, हाँ, या आपको लगता है कि उसका पायरेसी हो रहा है, सो व्हाट यू कैन डू इज यू कैन गेट योरसेल्फ टू द कोर्ट, right? You can present your evidence, you can present your arguments, right? And the court has to make sure that it stops infringement. ठीक है, द कोर्ट हैज टू मेक श्योर कि जो भी डैमेज हुआ है उसके लिए आपको कॉम्पनसेशन मिले, जो भी लॉस हुआ है आपका उसके लिए आपको कॉम्पनसेशन मिले, राइट? सो दिस इज वेयर we also need to ensure that there is a proper court in place, right? Acha, there is also something which is called as border measures. Border measure basically goes ahead and says that we understand that the custom authorities can suspend release of सस्पेक्टेड इन्फ्रिंजमेंट गुड. तो अगर मुझे लगता है एज अ कस्टम ऑफिसर कि ये जो गुड है ये कॉपीड गुड है जिसके ऊपर एक पेटेंट ऑलरेडी लिया हुआ है किसी ने, आई कैन स्टॉप इट्स इम्पोर्ट एंड एक्सपोर्ट, right? Usually it applies to import, but optionally it can apply to export also, right? So custom authorities can suspend release of suspected infringing goods, right? And then there is criminal procedure. Criminal procedure says that the moment we say that there is copyright piracy or there is willful trademarking counterfeiting, तो उस टाइम पे हम उन लोगों को imprisonment दे सकते हैं, we can put them to jail, we can give them monetary fine, we can do seizure of whatever production they were doing, right? So अगर मुझे लगता है for example that someone is going ahead and someone is I've heard this a lot, that someone is rotating ma'am, few of your video lectures, few of your notes. So what I can do? I can get to the court. I can, go ahead and file a complaint in the station, right? Police station. And if whenever it's found who did it, there can be some penalties, right? There can be seizure, right? There can be stopping of further circulation of that material, right? So criminal procedure is another thing which we have to go ahead and we have to see. Okay. Now, but in exam, they can also ask you what is, the 30 years of TRIPS, right? What, we understand that TRIPS came into picture and, already 30 years of TRIPS have passed, right? So in exam, they can ask you how those 30 years of TRIPS have been there. How did TRIPS evolve, right? What was the impact of TRIPS agreement on global IPR, right? How did TRIPS influence the access of medicine, of technological transfer, especially in the developing countries? So all these kind of questions can also be asked in exam, and you have to be very sure that you write the answer to each one of these questions. ऐसा कुछ भी आपसे एग्जाम में पूछा जा सकता है, आपको इन सबसे रिलेटेड आंसर प्रिपेयर करना